Hi, it's Mark here. Thanks for coming along and having a wee look at my video tutorial related to charts and graphs and the use of them and why you would use them. So just very quickly, not keep you here too long, but I wanted to just run through the reasons for them, why you would use them, the different types of charts, and also what you can get from them and what you can see from them. So it's the purpose of them and obtaining that information from them. As you can see, what we have here is we get rainfall for Bali in an average year. We've got it through for the months, for each of the months of the year, and the amount of rainfall in centimetres. Now, just looking at data now, imagine if this was an awful lot of data. It could be quite confusing to look at it, first of all, until you start to really analyse it. The other problem as well is that very quickly looking at it, it's quite difficult to see where the trends are unless you start to take time to look at it. So we could look at it and think to ourselves, all right, you can see that during the summer months there, June, July, and August, and then even September, it's very, very low. The lowest one is August, we can see that. The highest one, well, we're going to then look up and down it again. We can see that it's January, possibly. February is close to it there, but December is more than February. Now, we can get that information from looking at the data. Now, imagine if that was quite a lot of data, that becomes even more difficult to see that with all that data. Whereas if we look at something that's more graphical, that is where we can see any trends and we can see anything identifying from that very, very quickly, so we can. We're human beings, we tend to work more in terms of what we can see and what we can feel and touch, as opposed to figures. So if we look at a chart here, so we've got the rainfall in a chart here, so we've got a column chart, and straight away we can see what the largest column is. Now this chart has axes labelled for us because that's how we would then know what's going on in the chart. We could assume, but it's best not to assume sometimes and be told so that we know. So we could assume that it's the months of the year because it's January through to December. That's fine, but we wouldn't know what the numbers are on this axis here on the left. So it's told us rainfall in centimetres. Okay, so that's for this axis. So we're able to look along. Now we can also see where it comes up to, and we can then judge. So for example, this one here for March, I've put the figures in, we've got the figures located here, but what if we didn't? Well, we should be able to see from the chart how close they are to the line, and it gives us an estimate. Now, this isn't exact as what it could be, so if we take the lowest one of 2, well, we know that the 0 is way down the bottom there, and then we've got 5. Now, this is a 3D chart. Sometimes that can be a bit more difficult to view. Had it been a plain chart, maybe possibly a little bit easier. We'll look at some other charts in a minute. So we can see straight away here the lowest one, which is 2. We can see that it's low down compared to the 5. So we know that there's the 5s there, so the 2, it's less than half, just slightly less than half. So that's how we can then assume with the figures. We're told here with the figures, but what if we weren't? We'd be able to work them out quite close. Now, the whole point of it graphically is not to be totally exact, it's to give us an idea of it, to be graphical, to let us see. But you do have to be quite consistent with your charts, and you do have to see the information from it, and it does have to be quite close to the mark. So we know that this one here is close to 35, but it's not. Now it does have 34 there for us. Now, just looking at the chart, if we didn't have the figures there, what could we take from this chart? What could we see from this chart without any figures there? Well, we could see that the most amount of rainfall is in January, and the least amount of rainfall is in August. That's the first things that we can take from this chart. Next, we can then do a trend. So we can see that January, February, March, we can see that it's getting less and less And then it comes down to April and May, and then during June, July, August, it's very low, and then it's starting to rise again. So it's then September, October, and then it's rising back up again for November and December. So we can see there when it's least rainy, and we can see when it is very, well, quite rainy during the rainy season there. So we would say the rainy season is possibly, I would say, November, December, January, February, March. Just by looking at the distances and the lengths of those columns, and that's what we can take from that. We can also see from the title that it is rainfall for Bali in an average year. So that's how charts can help us, if charts are labelled correctly and if they show us and demonstrate to us what's happening. If we look at another chart, it's the same data, but it can be seen in a slightly different way. And what we'll do is we then look to see where there is changes within the chart. So you can see where the line changes, where it's going down, where it's going up. We can also see where there's a greater change. So the greatest change that I can see from this chart here is a very, very quick change is between October and December. Because look at the line shooting straight up there, October to December. So we know that that's possibly a very much of a change between two paths there. So we can see there, in terms of other changes, we could maybe say there's a big change between March and April, because look how it dips between that March, where we can see the point here in March, which we get the value there, 23, that we can see, but we'll be able to judge what it is by looking across. So if we follow the point of the line across to the guide that is the axis, and the axis will tell us. So if we follow it across, we know that it's maybe towards 20, more towards 25 than 20. So we could then assume that it's round about 23. Okay, and if we look down the way and we follow the line down the way, it would just, as if you had a ruler, but moving down from that point, then we can see that that's for March. So if somebody was to say to you, what's the rainfall in Bali an average year for March? Well, there's March. You maybe get a ruler, or just with your eye, follow it straight up. There we go. So we can see what it is. If we didn't do it electronically and it was on paper, it would still be the same, and it would then move across to the other axis, and we get the rainfall in centimetres, and we can then judge that as being round about 23. We can also see other points as well. So for example, there's June and July. So there's June, and we can see that it's on the 5 line. So it depends on the lines, and it depends upon the intervals that we have in the lines as well. But we can see trends, and we can see what's happening from charts. Very graphical. The last chart that I've got for you here is a comparison chart on rainfall. And what I've done on this one is I've got the axes labelled, so we get month along the bottoms there, and we've just done January and August. That's all I've done for you, so that it's a comparison, and we can see a huge comparison here, so we can, and we could estimate it, so we can. And this is the thing from charts, we can estimate what's happening with a chart, especially if it's very, very good chart or whether it's labelled nicely. So what we can also see, if we look across here, we can see that January, if we just look across, it's 34. So it's 34 centimetres. How do we know that? Because it's telling us it's centimetres there, and we know that it's January because it's telling us the month. August is 2 centimetres. And we can compare, so we can use charts to compare as well. And what we can do is we can compare the very small, minuscule amount there, and we could actually divide it out. So we could do figures from this as well, so we could even percentages. That's another story, and that's when we get into percentages. Just now I'm going to leave you just with the charts here, and you can have a look yourself just to see from the data there how we've actually illustrated it and why we would illustrate it. Thanks for looking, and hope you're taking something from this video. Bye just now.